Shall we start?
Yes, go ahead. I'll share screen.
Okay, we're on.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just letting all of our attendees in. Welcome to the official launch event of the UN Women Gender Action Lab. Okay. I know we're a little bit over time, but we are just going to let a few more people in. I just want to remind everyone today that we have sign language available for those who would like to partake of it. You can also enable closed captions on your Zoom. If you go to the bar where you see the different functions, you might need to click more. And then you should see the icon for closed captions, and you can enable them in the language that you wish to speak to support more accessible communication today. Please do feel free to use the Q&A function to submit any questions you might have. We are in Zoom webinar, so you may not have access to the chat. But we have an exciting lineup and agenda planned for you today, and we will have some time, I think, with speakers that we have joining us today for some Q&A. So please go ahead and do use that Q&A function if you would like to. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So my name is Amy Baum. I'm with the UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific with our Women's Economic Empowerment team. And I'm going to be your MC for today and guide you through this new program that we have and take you through the journey with us. Okay, so what I want to do a little bit first, before we get started, we know who our panelists are in the background, but it's quite exciting to see. We have about 105 attendees joining us. So I want to see who's in the room, who's actually joining us. So I'm going to launch a poll. You should all see a poll that's gone up asking who's in the room. So I hope everyone can see this. Yes, we've got some answers coming in already, which is great. Okay. I'm going to try and drag this onto my screen, and I hope you can see it just so you get those live time results. And then I will end it in a little bit and we can look over them. What we see so far, okay, we have some joining from Europe, some from Africa, the majority from Southeast Asia. So the majority joining us today from our region, but we do have some joining in from around the globe. Okay, the types of organizations that people are joining us from today. We've got quite an interesting mix. It's great to see, and I think this actually really represents the diversity among our community of private sector and private sector stakeholders within our office. So we've got nonprofits, UN entities, governments, other. I know we can't cover all the spectrums with our choices, but we've got some large companies, micro enterprises, and SMEs, which we know make up a large portion of our community. So it's great to see that we have so many of you joining us today, and thanks for taking time out of your afternoon. I want to, before we go to some opening remarks, introduce one other element or person that's in the room, so to speak, that you're going to be hearing a lot about today. And that is the WEPs, the Women's Empowerment Principles. This is really what's bringing a lot of us together and has kind of framed our journey and sparked this new movement we're going to start together. So it's a framework for all private sector entities of all size and sector to guide gender-responsive business conduct across the value chain. So there are 7 different principles. I will share a link so you can read about them later if you're not familiar. But this is the only framework guiding private sector action that really takes this value chain approach, going from leadership to the workplace to marketplace and down into the community. So inspired by the WEPs, I want to do one more thing before we hand over to some of our great speakers to really kick us off in this space. We asked some of you a question on social media. So kind of inspired by these different WEPs, we were only able to have 4 choices on our social media polls, but we asked some of you where you thought innovation and new approaches are needed most. We know that more action needs to be done. We know that innovation needs to be taken. So in our online poll, I was quite surprised, and maybe I'll ask our comms colleague if we can launch the second poll for everybody that's here joining us today. We saw from our online audience that most of them actually thought the most innovation was needed, here we go, in gender inclusive workplace. We have a few more options for today. You should see them on the screen. We're looking across this web's value chain. So leadership, commitment, women in leadership, workplace safety, supplier diversity, and looking at gender responsive procurement, marketing, product and service design, transparency and reporting. There are, of course, other areas, but this is just to give you kind of that spectrum of the webs. So we're curious to see what all of you think joining us online. We've got a very good community, which is great to see. Okay, so I see so far from the results, we still see women in leadership and gender inclusive workplace is the areas where people still think there needs to be the most action. Okay, I'm going to keep us going for now. We'll leave that poll open and actually see the different results that we get. But we're really happy to join in this session with you and really explore together as we start to form something new that we'll talk about in a bit. So before that, we are absolutely thrilled to welcome a few guest speakers to kick us off and kind of share a little bit of what inspired why we're all here today. So first, I'd like to hand over for some opening remarks to Sarah Golding, who's Assistant Secretary of the Gender Equality Branch, joining us from the Government of Australia Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Sarah, I'll go ahead and hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you all this afternoon, Canberra time. I'd like to begin, as is customary, by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the lands of the Ngunnawal people here in Australia, and acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this region and respect their continuing connection to land and community, paying respects to their culture and elders, both past, present and emerging. For those of you, I really am excited that this is a disability accessible forum. So I'll also note that I'm a woman with brown hair that's tied back in a ponytail. I'm wearing big black glasses, and because it's Canberra and it's cold, I've got a big black shawl on. So it is just incredibly exciting for me to be able to join you all today as colleagues from Southeast Asia, but also around the world, to launch this very bold new initiative for transformative change, building on, as Amy has said, the strengths of interest and support for the Women's Empowerment Principles with a Gender Action Lab to promote innovation and impact for gender equality in the Asia Pacific, powered by the Women's Empowerment Principles. There are so many things that we know about economies in the Asia Pacific. And importantly, we know that our region is actually a really key driver of global economic growth. But within our region, there are vast inequalities between and within countries. And when we bring a gender lens to what growth looks like, we can see that women and girls in particular are doing extraordinary things, growing businesses, creating innovations against discriminatory social norms, other structural barriers, and in some places and spaces, decision-making authorities and autonomies that are being inhibited, all of which impacts the full and equal integration of women into the economy and the benefits of women's economic integration to our economies and our economic futures. There are so many things that we know about why this is important. Gender equality and women's economic empowerment is a really powerful catalyst to reduce poverty and driving sustainable development. When we ensure greater access and opportunities for women to participate in and flourish in the labour market, we see societies growing healthier and stronger economies that are more resilient in the face of shocks. For Australia, we're a really committed partner globally and in our region to advance gender equality and women's empowerment. It's an important priority for us at home in our national policy, and it's an important priority for our work internationally. A key element of this is how we work with the private sector. Our flagship Investing in Women program is supporting local business coalitions in Indonesia, the Philippines, Myanmar and Vietnam to work with colleagues in private sector businesses to develop and implement policies and programs that will actually change workplaces, advance workplace gender equality, increase inclusion. We've been very pleased since 2021 to work with UN Women to increase the reach, commitment to and implementation of the Women's Empowerment Principles, or the WEPs. This is a holistic framework that gives companies a guide on how to become more gender responsive in workplaces, in marketplaces, in communities and economies. With nearly 10,000 signatories around the world, over 2,580 companies in the Asia Pacific, this is a huge body of momentous evidence for change. The Asia Pacific WEPs Awards in 2021 and 2022 have really showcased some extraordinary and inspiring private sector innovations and best practice. And these have inspired, I know, many others to take action. And we have applications open now, those of you that have joined, for the 2024 award cycle. Now, in November last year, there was actually the first ever Asia Pacific WEPs Forum in Manila. This brought together nearly 200 public and private stakeholders to reflect on and discuss where we stand now and what are our shared priorities to move ahead. And as there were reflections on the really extraordinary work that was being done, there was also a number of gaps that were identified where deeper action was needed, that required setting strategies, taking more concrete actions, building multi-stakeholder collaborations where we can drive gender equality in organisations and in our businesses, in supply chains and communities. So we come to the Gender Action Lab. This is a logical continuation of how Australia has worked with UN Women in the Asia Pacific. Importantly, what we're going to see is this lab is complementing and amplifying the work of many others in the region, including our Investing in Women program, but also many other initiatives within ASEAN countries. We know that we will realise gender equality in the world of work when we think and work intersectionally. We recognise the diversities that we all bring as a strength, these different aspects of identity that shape our experiences as women, men, people of diverse gender identities, people with disabilities. DFAT is proud to be a leader of how we can bring this intersectionality to the fore and promote the rights and equity for people with disabilities in access to inclusive work and economic opportunities. This is going to be a really important element of the Gender Action Lab. What do we have now? Well, we have a foundation that's been set. We've got an incredible community of private sector champions. A lot of you who are online now, I'd really just like to take a moment to give all of you an extraordinary commendation for your leadership, your vision, your commitment, and the impact that you bring. We know that we're not on track to achieve any of the Sustainable Development Goals, that progress on gender equality does feel in many places harder than ever. So that's why investing in initiatives like the Gender Action Lab that are going to be multi-stakeholder collaborations is needed. It's time for us to partner together to deepen our action, create and forge new partnerships, to leverage the opportunities of innovation to deliver a transformative impact on gender equality and women's economic empowerment, and grow the economies and our futures in the region. The Gender Action Lab is going to do just this. And so today at this launch, it's the very first step on a much larger journey to realise our aspirations and commitments for inclusive economies and thriving societies. I hope you really enjoy hearing more about the Gender Action Lab today. Thank you to Susan and Amy and all of those who played an important role in organising the event today. And I really want to call on all of us together, participants, other governments, corporations, civil society, innovators and partners, to work together, driving systemic positive change together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We really, really appreciate your remarks and for joining us today, and we're equally excited. And where we're going to turn to next, we're also very happy to have with us Susan Ferguson, who is the Regional Director ad interim for our UN Women Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, also tuning in from Bangkok to share a few remarks. And Susan, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and it's wonderful to be here today. And I'm going to follow Sarah's lead and try and describe what I look like for those who may not be able to see me. So I'm sort of an older woman. I'm wearing wire glasses. I've got pink lipstick on and shoulder-length fair hair. I'm also wearing a dupatta from India made by Sewa, which is hand embroidered from the Self-Employed Women's Association, a network of nearly 3 million women in India who work in the informal sector. So thank you so much for having me here today, and thank you for coming, everyone. So I'd really like to give special thanks, of course, to Sarah, friend and colleague, working on gender equality from a different angle, but we are united in what we're all trying to achieve on gender equality. Thank you for being here, Sarah, and for DFAT's long-standing commitment to UN Women and to the women in this region. We're really grateful to you, and your support has continued to enable us to make a difference for women in the region. So I'm really pleased to be here with you all to officially unveil together the UN Women Gender Action Lab, the innovation and impact for gender equality in the Asia Pacific region. It's very exciting for me to have the chance to launch this with you. Globally, we're simply not making enough progress to move the needle on gender equality. I think we are all well aware of this, especially in the area of women's economic empowerment. According to the most recent Global Gender Gap report, the estimated timeframe to close the gender gap in economic participation and opportunity currently stands at 152 years. We will all be dead by the time that happens. We need to hurry along and really speed along and increase our efforts to close those gaps. In the Asia Pacific, persistent gender inequalities and discriminatory norms and legislation present barriers to women's entry and success in the labour market, holding back inclusive economic growth and holding back the lives of many women and girls and their families. In our region, women's labour force participation rates were regressing even before COVID. Disparities in the world of work can be seen across levels and functions. Women still dominate the informal sector and are segregated in the most vulnerable jobs. Women entrepreneurs face barriers to opening and growing businesses and to access finance and markets, and women hold only 5% of CEO positions across the entire region. So this is the reality today, which stands in sharp contrast to the potential future that we could all have. By advancing gender equality, investing in women can contribute $4.5 trillion to Asia Pacific's annual GDP by 2025. The social and economic opportunity is there, and the case actually has been made so many times before. But unlocking it requires concerted action and effort by a range of diverse stakeholders across economic value chains to enable women of all backgrounds and at different stages of their lives to participate equally and fully in the economy. At UN Women, one of the key vehicles to advance gender equality for women in the world of work has been through the Women's Empowerment Principles, the WEPs that Sarah talked about. You heard Sarah reference our Asia Pacific community of over 2,580 WEP signatories. And these companies employ at least 5.2 million people, 2.6 million of whom are women. What is truly astounding, actually, is that this number grows almost every day. So it stood at below 600 in 2019, and now we are 2,000 more in strength. So that's just in the past few years, and we know there is enormous interest in the private sector of engaging more on gender equality because many understand the impact this will have for their companies, but also for women and girls and the families. This private sector community, of course, it's not a homogenous group, and it represents enormous diversity in size, sector, and mission. More than 57% of our WEPs are micro, small, medium enterprises, employing actually fewer than 250 people. But we have companies at the other end also that are massive, employing thousands and thousands of people. So we need to embrace this diversity and further build it into the private sector at large and leverage it for innovation. Diverse teams offer broader perspectives and bring more information to the table and innovation. Research by the Harvard Business Review has found that the most diverse enterprises had both 19% points higher innovation revenues and 9% points higher operating margins on average. Therefore, again, we have the business case for this. One of our key platforms to recognise and celebrate the diverse actions is through the WEPs Awards, which have recognised more than 300 leaders and businesses for their actions over the years. As Sarah said, last year we convened the first in-person meeting of the WEPs community in the Philippines, and I was very lucky to be at that meeting. We heard amazing insights, actually, and recommendations from industry leaders, social entrepreneurs, multinationals, governments, and business regulators. Just last week, we released the outcome report of the WEPs Forum, and I really urge you all to download it today, and I'm sure that Amy or someone can put that up in the chat. But what came through loud and clear was that despite the enormous uptake in commitments to the WEPs, practical action is still really lagging. And there's a critical need to test new solutions and pilot more innovative approaches to implementing the WEPs. Through the Gender Action Lab, we really seek to leverage the innovation capabilities of the private sector to make further changes within the private sector, and equally to foster deeper innovation within UN Women and in our work with all our partners. As we head towards the UN Summit of the Future in September this year, we'll really need solutions, new thinking, and new partnerships to develop and build alliances capable of truly moving the needle on gender equality and the Agenda 2030. As Sarah emphasised in her remarks, we embark on this journey together with the Australian government as two partners to begin with, but already seeking to build the Gender Action Lab as a collective, multi-stakeholder platform that can grow as a broader movement and continue to address the most persistent challenges to gender equality and women's empowerment. So I'm going to hand back to Amy to tell you more about the Gender Action Lab itself. And as she does this, I invite you to really allow yourselves to imagine new futures for gender equality and to be inspired today to take up the charge and join us in this movement for action. So thank you so much, Amy. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Susan, and also to Sarah. You've really set us off for a good start today. So we are, as these events often go, running a little bit tight on time. I'm going to share an introduction and an overview to what the Gender Action Lab is, and tell all of you how we got here today and why it started and what we'll be doing. And I'll try and move a little quickly because we do have an exciting lineup of panelists to share with you. Okay, so I'm not going to go over every single item on this slide. This is just to show you that this is really something that's been in the works of building the WEPS ecosystem and on a journey with the private sector and multi-stakeholder private sector collaboration, starting in 2019 when we had a flagship program called We Empower Asia that was in partnership with the European Union. This really was our flagship program that helped us get started and build momentum to the WEPS, start conducting that outreach, start engaging with larger corporates, with SMEs alike, and with the ecosystem and the community as well, policymakers and business regulators. This just gives you a bit of a snapshot. We started in 2020 with our Asia Pacific WEPS Awards, which you've heard about from Susan and Sarah. I'll tell you a little bit more later. We've also developed a number of knowledge products. We've done some research, some policy analysis as well throughout that time. We did a landscaping study looking at how the WEPS actually could be a policy tool for governments in the region to be able to better enable private sector to measure and report on their action for gender equality. We also published a WEPS transparency and accountability framework, which provides guidance to track and report on your gender metrics that align to all the different WEPS principles. We've done innovative programming with different types of private sector. So we've run different sets of gender responsive acceleration programs where we've worked with care entrepreneurs. We also have a climate tech acceleration program where we're working with SMEs and organizations in the region to have gender responsive business conduct in their business models and also take an approach to the acceleration that's gender responsive throughout. We've also partnered with ASEAN to produce last year this ASEAN Policy Action Brief on looking at how we can advance gender in business reporting to implement the women's empowerment principles and advance gender equality in the region. In 2022, we launched the Trends and Opportunities to Drive Gender Equality in the Private Sector report, which looked at the current trends, the gaps, what more needed to happen to drive action. In 2023, just last year, which Susan mentioned, we revisited these trends in the WEPS Forum, which was really, we had 3 cycles of the WEPS Awards and had all this recognition for good actions that were taking place, but we hadn't ever convened the WEPS community and also brought the multi-stakeholder dimension of policymakers, of academia, of support organizations together. So in this WEPS forum, we revisited the trends and we said, what is still valid? What is new? Where do we still need more action? What are the innovative areas we need to approach? And we really reflected on a lot of that. And that has helped us get to today where we launched the Gender Action Lab. So coming out of this WEPS forum, all of this data on the page isn't so critical. I'm not going to go through it all. But what we really saw reflecting on the past 5 years, we've seen this incredible uptake in commitments to the WEPS, right? We've grown by 2,000 signatory companies in just 5 years, whereas in the 9 from the WEPS inception, we had 600. So we've seen this incredible uptake and commitment from the private sector, but one of the trends in our trends report really found that despite this commitment, intentional action, target setting, putting plans in place really was lagging behind. On the flip side, among the public policies and regulations, we also see that there is commitment, or there's a broader level commitment to gender equality. But this sheet that you see is actually a policy scorecard that we conducted with our landscaping of different policies applying to the private sector in ASEAN. And we found this same thing, this action gap between commitment to taking real concerted action, kind of driving the path towards impact. We really see this action gap. We really see that something deeper is needed, more innovation and newer ways of driving that action and actually developing concrete solutions was needed. So that gets us to our new platform for action and impact. Some of you may have seen this graphic on social media. What we're really bringing together at the core of the Gender Action Lab, we're leveraging these WEPs. These are the 7 icons that make up those women's empowerment principles, and bringing together private sector, gender equality, and innovation. We need these new solutions. We need to test the boundaries. Business as usual, so to speak, is not doing enough. We're not making enough progress. We're going to use these intersections to translate commitments into accelerated action and impact. 2 of the key pathways that we're going to be using to do this, these change pathways, are really through innovation, leveraging the innovation capabilities of the private sector. Whether it's larger corporates or SMEs and innovators, Susan has talked about the diversity, the incredible diversity we actually have in this region. We're looking at those capabilities that are inbuilt and that the private sector has to be agile, to move quickly, to turn new things around, that we want to learn from and be inspired from, and apply those as well to then leverage innovation to transform within the private sector through the lens of the women's empowerment principles, promoting broader gender equality. What we're also doing as a cross-cutting approach that's embedded in the program is taking a strong lens on diversity and inclusion and an intersectional lens to gender. So this will work on broader dimensions of gender diversity, including disability, LGBTIQ populations, age, ethnic background, considering socioeconomic status, and other intersectional markers as we go through the program. Okay, the GAL vision. So you've heard this detailed out a little bit, that this is the first step in a much longer journey and for a much larger platform. We're starting with the first 4 years, 2024 to 2028. In 4 countries, we will be starting this deeper action in Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. We'll be taking this approach and we want to expand this. We want this to be a call to action to everyone joining us today. And we hope that we get you thinking and we get you excited and ideating. We want this to expand into the Asia Pacific and be part of a larger movement. We're bringing multi-action approaches. We're also bringing a multi-stakeholder approach. So we'll be looking at innovation labs, which I'll talk about, systems labs, growing into applied research, hackathons, WEPs forums, all different types of actions that we are really excited to co-create with all of you and with other different types of partners, bringing together the ecosystem, taking us to 2030 and beyond, really walking this journey together. For our starting journey of the 2024 to 2028 Gender Action Lab, we have a 3-phased approach. So we're looking at our overall outcome to have more private sector companies in Asia Pacific implementing gender responsive business practices and policies to enable more women to lead and participate equitably in the world of work. So we have a 3-phased approach. I'll walk you to this briefly because I want to get to the panel. But we start with awareness and engagement. We move into an action phase of innovation labs, and then we look at moving towards recognition and recommendations. And this has a feedback loop so that we keep running in a cycle and keep learning and keep refining and ensuring that the private sector practices we come out with also help feed into policy discussions and dialogue and further research and future actions. So phase one is awareness raising and engagement, where we're really starting broad awareness with different companies. What are the WEPs? What do they do? What are some of the tools that we offer to support implementation? We'll move into some consultations and some convenings with different stakeholders across various WEPs topics. And then we'll start to get to a smaller group. We'll actually be looking for some of you that are leaders or innovators, whether you're entrepreneurs or other innovation players, to help us craft challenge statements of what we want to work on, what the key areas that we need to address are. And we'll put together dedicated cohorts of corporates and innovators to actually test some of these solutions. And the modality for that will be innovation labs. This is our key approach for the Gender Action Lab. We'll have country labs to start with. We're also looking at having a regional lab that focuses across ASEAN countries. Again, this is the start of the vision of what we want to be something much bigger across the region. So each of these labs will run in turn with a specific thematic focus. These are some examples of where we might focus. So we might have a lab specifically on creating more inclusive workplaces for all, including women and people living with disabilities. This could be advancing family-friendly workplaces, potentially through providing employer-supported care services. This could be looking at the marketplace. How can we support gender-responsive procurement and get more women into the supply chain? This could also be looking at strengthening accountability on gender reporting, for example, through ESG or other frameworks. So we'll take this thematic action approach to each of the labs. This will help feed into phase 3, which is recognition, best practices, and recommendations. This will be brought to life in a number of different ways through research products, convenings, also knowledge products that we have. But two of the key platforms that we will use are the Asia Pacific WEPs Awards and the Asia Pacific WEPs Forum. So these are going to occur in a rotating 2-year cycle. Right now, we're in the middle of the Asia Pacific WEPs Awards. Applications are still open. I will send you the link also in the chat to the website and you can learn more. This is recognizing best practices across the different WEPs. This also recognizes actions from SMEs all the way to larger corporates, to chambers of commerce, business associations as well. That will be this year. Next year, we'll convene again at the Asia Pacific WEPs Forum. So you can access the outcome report from last year's forum. We'll bring the community together again. We'll relook at the awardees from this year. And we'll also dive again into what we've been doing in the Gender Action Lab and hopefully ideate and co-create new solutions at that point. Okay, that was a very kind of fast and furious tour of what the Gender Action Lab does. You will be able to access more information shortly. But as we look towards what we really can do and need in terms of bringing together innovation, the private sector, gender equality for impact, we're going to move to a short inspiration panel. So to help us moderate the panel today, we have our UN Women Pakistan country representative, Sharmila Rasool. And we're also very happy to welcome as our speakers, Siti Mahiran Ahmad, who's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Lead for Deloitte Southeast Asia, Net Supatravanit, who's the co-founder of Isla Generation and CEO of Ally App, and Emil Schmitz, who's the Managing Director of Base of the Pyramid Innovation Center, or BOP Inc. Okay, Sharmila, I will hand it over to you for the panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. So since Susan and Sarah has set the tone, I'm not going to take the trouble of giving you the background of why this panel is set today to discuss a groundbreaking initiative UN Women Regional has taken forward with our Gender Acceleration Lab. But before I hand over to the panel with some questions, I just want to inspire you with one statement, a proverb from a quote from Albert Einstein. And I quote, he said, "If you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got. I think that's a very simple, logical statement for us to remind ourselves that gender equality cannot wait for 152 years, as Susan mentioned, or 300 years for that matter, to achieve total gender equality. Some changes need to be made. So the Gender Equality, Gender Accelerating Lab is a catalytic move by UN Women in collaboration with its partners, recognizing that the way forward for us to really achieve the targets that are lagging behind is through collaboration and using our intersectional abilities to work together. And here I also borrow Sarah Goulding's, words where she said, this lab is innovation and impact powered by webs. I think that sums it up all for us. So without much ado, I go to the panel. We have 3 inspirational speakers today. And the panel discussion will take place in 2 parts. The first part is a little longer, and the second part, shorter questions. So my first question is to Siti. Since Amy has introduced Siti briefly, I'm going to quickly introduce Siti, and we already have a 159 participants. So I want the participants to hear from you, Siti Maharan Ahmed, who is our Deloitte Southeast Asia leading corporate in driving change and implementation, new holistic approaches for gender equality. And you are a long-standing partner of WEBS and a champion in UN Women's Books. So Deloitte also received a WEBS Award in 2020 for Gender Inclusive Workplace, in 2021 for Community Engagement and Partnerships, and you were featured in our report called The Trends and Opportunities to Advance Gender Equality in Business. Maharan, you have joined us today, and I'm sure you will be talking at length, but let me put forward the question to you. Is like, we've been talking about the crucial importance of private sector leading. As you know, private sector is seen as the growth engine and also is seen as an engine for catalytic change. You present us with a great example with all what you have done. Tell us a bit more about Deloitte's approach and initiatives for gender equality and also broader areas of diversity and inclusion. Maharan, since we're running out of time, I must remind you, you have 5 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Shamila, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really an honor for me to be here today representing Deloitte Southeast Asia. And, as proud signatories of the Women's Empowerment Principle, we are incredibly excited to be part of this grand initiative that can drive deeper action and adoption of WEBs. So thank you for your question, Sharmila. At Deloitte, gender balance has always been a prominent focus for our all-in global inclusion strategy since we first launched it in 2018. So we have focused our efforts around 3 pillars. One is leadership commitment, 2 is enabling policies, and 3rd is the inclusive environment. So with WEBs woven into the fabric of everything that we do. So first, let me talk a little bit about our leadership commitment, right? We have actually set several aspirational goals around female representation in our firm. So in Southeast Asia, the goal is to have 37% of females at the partner level by financial year 25, right? 2025. So we have also attach personal KPIs to our leaders to ensure that there's accountability and there's progress being made here, right? So, and secondly, on our enabling policies, that spans the entire career life cycle, from recruitment to promotion to succession processes to mentoring, sponsorship, and also supporting our talent throughout with the flexible work arrangements, among many other things. And we also work very closely with our talent teams to run regular gender pay equity studies, and we support any corresponding actions that can help close that gender pay gap where it exists. And on our 3rd pillar for our inclusive environment, we focus a lot on education and training. And we have the Asia Pacific Inspiring Women program that has been running for a couple of years now. It's designed to build that future-ready female leaders, and we do this with a tailored approach to education, exposure, experience, and support to accelerate that progression of women into the leadership roles. So as part of our Women in Tech Bold Play initiative, we also look into, upskilling and reskilling women from non-tech roles into tech roles. Among the many different things that we do, we also acknowledge them with Women in Tech Awards. So additionally, we also roll out our signature inclusive leadership activation labs internally to help integrate that inclusive leadership into our core values through awareness building, through skills development, action planning, experiential learning, which is really important for this type of work, as well as making sure there's accountability at the end, right? So moving on from gender, we know that there's like more than 700 million people with disabilities estimated to live in Asia and the Pacific region. And as such, we've expanded our focus into accessibility and neurodiversity. So Deloitte has published our Asia Pacific Accessibility and Inclusion Plan as a guide for an inclusive environment where all our people can thrive, including those with disability and those who are neurodivergent. So this plan is very much guided by the ILO Global Business and Disability Network Charter, to which we are signatories. So in this vein, right, we focus on three areas: inclusiveness, equity at every stage, and culture and community. Let me just give you some examples of some of the actions that we're doing in this space, right? So over the next 3 years, we're really focusing on raising the standards of our standards with assistive technology and accessible design. So we are supporting a more barrier-free technology experience by increasing that our standards of online usability to ensure that there is compliance with the World Wide Web content accessibility guidelines. We are also consulting with people with lived experience to gain their perspectives and ensure that they are represented at every stage within the process internally, right? And we are also equipping our hiring teams with the skills and knowledge to provide an accessible and inclusive experience through the recruitment and induction process. So, and on the leadership side, we are providing our leaders and managers with training to help support and manage and help to encourage people with disabilities and those who are neurodivergent to be able to flourish within the firm. So as we move forward here, I think collaboration with UN Women is essential. By working together, I'm sure we can accelerate that adoption and the implementation of more gender responsive business policies and practices like you mentioned earlier. So I believe our joint efforts can really can hopefully inspire other organizations fact that brings about systemic change that we all know needs to happen, right? So I'd like to close this by just posing a question to everyone here, just think about, is that, how can we leverage our collective strength to create a more inclusive and equitable future for all? And what specific actions can your organizations take to drive deeper adoption of gender equality and, of course, to the broader DI principles? So thank you. And I look forward to our continued collaboration and the impactful changes that we can achieve together. Hand this back to you, Sharmila.
Sharmila, I see you, but you're on mute.
Oh, okay. So sorry. I have said some very inspirational things there. So thank you so much, Maher, and I'll come back to you on the second round. And I hope that all the inspirational things that you've just shared is being listened to in the virtual room by companies, both small and large. So talking about SMEs and small and medium scale enterprises, I now turn to Net Supranavit. I hope you're pronouncing your surname correctly, Net. So, which we know, a large portion of our web's signatories are SMEs, and more than half, in fact. So, Net, you are the co-founder of ILA and are also the co-founder of the Ali app, which offers an innovative solution to creating safer workplace and even cities. So I have two questions for you. I'm gonna, split them into two so that the audience can better understand the learnings that you're about to share. So the first part of the question is, tell us a bit more about Ali and how you're also working with corporates to create change. So, Net, I will have to ask you to take 2.5 minutes to answer that question. I'll come back to the next question soon after. Thank you. Over to you, Net.
Thank you. So I'm Ned. Hi, guys. Lovely to kind of meet everybody. I am the co-founder of ILA and our application Ally, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. But our whole vision is really just to bring about gender equality in the safer workplace kind of realm. And this looks very different in different countries. So we actually started our startup in London. And, when you're working with more sort of on ground places within the Europe sphere, it looks very different from what on ground means in London, as well as, moving outwards to Berlin, where we also have a footprint, as well as Bangkok, where we've been working a lot now in the recent years. So, what do? We work with businesses in terms of corporate training and working with them on things like anti-harassment and working with them on how we can work on the issues. Oh, can you hear me, Amy? Perfect. So sorry about that. I'll just move in a little closer. So the work that we do is really working on the training side of things. So when I say training, I don't mean, we're sitting in a lecture room and kind of working on engaging. We're talking about application and also engaging workshops. So the way that we've devised this is through our Ally application. It's a B2B anti-harassment tool that we've been working on for the last few years, and it's sort of the work that UN knows us most for, and the WEPS awards. So the application itself can do things like tracking how far the employee has gone through their training. It can track things like how many incidents have been reported in the workplace. So I'll give you a bit of an example in the work we do in London versus the work we do in Bangkok. So in London, we work with a lot of smaller SMEs, such as gelato stores, gyms, fitness places, as well as educational institutions. So in this kind of aspect, we're tracking to see how many customers have come into the place and in the area, and how many people have they been able to help intervene. There could be a lot of issues such as harassment with customers or harassment between customer and employee, for instance. And this has really kind of shown us that when somebody is trained and equipped well, they're able to intervene with more confidence. And so that gave us confidence to kind of just move things about across the pond to Thailand, where we were established here in the last few years, but have been growing rapidly in the work that we've been doing, but on a more kind of larger scale. So we've been working a lot with big corporates and working on kind of training their staff, and mostly in the hospitality sector, to be honest. So we work a lot with Hyatt Regency, with Sensory, all these people who we've signed MOUs with in the last few years.
Thank you, Ned. That was fantastic start. Since you are very familiar with the SMEs and have worked with them, can you also tell us the role of smaller enterprises who are actually addressing gender equality by adapting innovative methods? Can you talk a little bit on that? Again, 2.5 minutes. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ned.
Yes. So I think anyone who's in the startup realm will understand that there's a lot of difficulties and challenges when it comes to working with corporations. So it's obviously great as somebody to have on your portfolio, on your client list, but I can tell you a few things that would be great for, bigger corporates to really kind of work together more to make everything more efficient and to make the process a lot easier. I think one of them is just kind of the decision-making process. And what I mean by that is when startups kind of approach you either to become a supplier or either, you know, to trial or test anything, I think it's a lot faster and everything will be a lot more efficient if there's sort of like this trial period where everybody can agree to do things just for, you know, a month or 2 months or 3 months before you kind of decide to make this nationwide or larger scale. And I think that really will help with the process of getting things up and running. So for me, when I kind of work on Ally and worked with our bigger corporates, these corporations have tens of thousands of employees. So what we said to them is, can we just trial and test with, let's say, 100 of your employees first, and we'll take it from there. And that's great for us because it shows that we can kind of prove ourselves really quickly. And it also is a great bonus for the companies too, because they don't want to take that bigger risk just yet. And you know, when you say, oh, let's just do it with 100 employees, or let's just do it with 200 employees in X locations, it really gives confidence to both sides that this can really be a long-term partnership. So that's definitely one way I could talk about the supplier engagement to kind of make it go faster for sure.
Excellent, Net. Excellent. You actually suggested a innovative idea. So I'm sure Maheran, listening to your suggestion, would take it into account in her future planning, being engaging with the SMEs in their supply chain. So next, we are going to turn into somebody that we have worked for a long time. In the past years, we have been engaging with WOPNIC, an agency that work at the bottom of the pyramid or the base of the pyramid. Now, human rights base, if you really take a human rights based approach, the terminology doesn't sound nice, but it is what it is. So I would invite Emil Schmizic to talk about both corporates and MSMEs, yeah, to advance innovation in their business models. How do you see the private sector as a motor for change, and why is innovation so critical? Very easy question. Emil, over to you.
Thank you, Sharmila, and thank you all for inviting me to this great launch. And I love the Einstein quote that you shared earlier. I'm definitely going to use that moving forward. Yeah, I'll focus a bit more on the marketplace area of the webs as well. And I'm very convinced that the private sector can actually be a massive motor for change if they advance the right type of innovations. And at Bob Inc., we've innovated with like dozens of corporates and hundreds of different SMEs, primarily to also serve lower income populations. And I firsthand witnessed the importance of that private sector innovation to drive progress on multiple SDGs, from providing nutritious foods to clean energy access or clean water access to also driving gender equality. And I've also witnessed an increasing amount of public sector partners also welcoming the private sector and teaming up in public-private partnerships actually to realize that innovation and change. A specific example that inspires me is an initiative we've been close to called Transform, which is a collaboration between Unilever, a big corporate, and FCDO, the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. And for many years, they've supported innovative social entrepreneurs to help them realize concrete impact for millions of low-income population consumers or entrepreneurs through business models. So they're really bridging also that intention-action gap that we referred to earlier. So if I now translate that, you know, knowing that companies are so an important motor of change for innovation, how do we then get them to move and innovate in the right direction, especially in terms of driving gender equality? And if I look at that marketplace focus here, I think there lies a huge opportunity to entice companies to apply more women-centered design or gender-responsive design. And I think here also the webs probably have already laid quite some nice groundwork. And I think if we want to engage those companies, whether they're corporates or SMEs, I think we need to do two things. We first need to show them the opportunity And I think there's a lot of research showing that there's a massive opportunities for companies to embrace women as entrepreneurs, as employees, and definitely also reach out to them as customers. But secondly, I think what we've also seen in our work that we really need to handhold and support these companies to actually then innovate for these target groups. Because if it's not their core business of the company, they really need that support to innovate. And we've worked with a number of companies that we really had to handle to go from a, let's say, a gender discriminatory or gender blind innovation approach where they might develop new products and services that are designed for man or for everyone, and therefore they're unconsciously really excluding women there. We've heard some examples before already, I think, in terms of credit solutions that are designed where people might need land titles which are not accessible for women. We've seen a lot of agent models where training is delivered, but it requires participants to be off-site for a number of days, which is preventing women to participate. And so there's a lot of these examples that we see, and I think there's a big opportunity to handhold companies and embrace a much more gender responsive innovation approach and help them to identify the right needs of that target group, co-design solutions with them and test and prototype these as well in the market, and then launch these new products, services, or approaches and keep measuring the impact and pivot where needed. Maybe a last remark I want to say is that we see a lot of traction also on the investor side, which I think is very, very exciting. We work with a number of impact investors and DFIs, and also through them, they are trying to entice the companies that they invest in to embrace more women-centered innovation and therefore also drive gender equality. So I think private sector has a great role to play, but they just need a bit of hand-holding, and we need to show them the opportunity to get them moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. That was fantastic, especially the fact that you mentioned about the women-centered designs. These are really inspirational ideas and the approaches that you have adapted. I know we are running out of time. We are just 5 minutes above time, and I also know there's a Q&A session after this. So I will ask Amy to take over from now onwards. But I really, really want to thank all our brilliant panelists which joined us ahead of time before even the webinar started and really shared your thoughts, candidly shared your thoughts. We really appreciate your time and willingness to participate and partner with us. Thank you so much. Back to Amy to run the question and answer session and then bring the webinar to a close. Thank you.
Amy, please unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry about that. Thank you, Sharmila. We may not have time for Q&A, but thank you to everyone who's staying with us. I want to do one final question to all of you. We may not have time to hear it from our panelists, but maybe you can participate in the mentee panelists. We want to hear for you, what is the most pressing issue that we need to address for gender equality in the world of work? If you were starting the Innovation Lab and you may be joining us for an Innovation Lab, what would be your first thematic area or challenge? So you can scan the QR. We have one response already. I'll show it in a minute. Or go to menti.com and enter 89100931 and enter your responses. Okay. Since we are over time, I'm going to show a few of these responses now, and then we will actually keep this open for a few more minutes if everyone is interested. But I see the care economy, workplace rights, women-centric design and innovation, engaging men for allyship, career comeback. Fabulous. We don't have to do any work. You're giving us all the ideas. Care economy, again, fabulous. That's great. It's a huge issue impacting women in the workplace. Okay. Strengthen diversity and inclusion, particularly on racial discrimination, gender stereotypes. Great. Okay, we see another care economy, homework conflict. Okay. Okay, just in the interest of time, I will leave that open a little bit longer. But I just wanted to thank everyone for joining today and say also you can download our introductory brief, which gives you a little bit of an overview on the Gender Action Lab. We also want you to get in touch with us and to join us. As we've shared previously, as Sarah Golding has shared and Susan, this is the first step. DFAT and UN Women are starting together, but we really want everyone to walk along with us. And we need your innovations, we need your ideas, we need your solutions. We want you to help us grow this and really make this bigger and impactful on a much larger scale than we can do on our own. So send us an email at genderactionlab.org. And you can download the information brief today and read a little bit more. I'm sorry that we didn't have the time for Q&A, but I will note everyone's questions and we can get back to you. And I just want to say thank you again for all of our panelists for joining us and our opening remarks. It's been really fascinating already to hear of the work you're doing, and I know many more examples that are out there. So thank you everyone for staying with us, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye.